Let's see. Refreshing, because I don't trust them when they say you're online until I see it. Refreshing again. And we're live. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time of the day or the time zone you're watching this. Because for me, it's afternoon, evening. For our guests here, it's morning, almost noon. And for you, depends on when you watch it. You can watch it on live mode, or as we call it here, zombie mode. Zombie mode doesn't mean you're dead. It means you're not watching it live. And after that stupid joke, my public service announcement that I do every day, as you know. Microphone, ready? Don't worry, Klaus, I do this every day. Wear your fucking mask. Let me repeat, wear your fucking mask. And now, in a more polite way, the mask is not to protect you, it's to protect others from you. We do that to protect others from our spit, if you want to call it like that. We do that to protect our elders, to protect our children. Everybody can get the coronavirus. And everybody tells you, oh, no, it doesn't affect children. No, that's a lie. And it can't kill your family members. Please don't be an idiot and say, oh, I haven't seen my best friend in 6 months, so I'm going to hug him or her without a mask, because you can cause chronic illnesses or death. So please wear your mask. And last but not least, if you think you're immortal, or even worse, you think you don't care about anybody else's safety because you're too important to wear a mask, leave this fucking channel now. I don't want you here. I don't want potential murderers in my channel. Fuck off and out. And with that said, in my most polite way, as you can see, Klaus, how are you, my friend? How's things in your neck of the woods?
I'm good, David. Thanks for asking. Things are okay. I have to, no complaints.
Good. If I ask you now, what is the thing you miss the most? That, I am your doctor. My name is Victor Frankenstein. This rotary pen is my screen. I just popped into you. Just cured you. Pandemic is over. We can do whatever we want. What's the first thing that you've been dying to do for months that you want to do now?
I think like everybody, I miss socializing. I miss being in a group of people. I miss going on vacation. I miss traveling. I miss conventions, David. I never thought that I would say that, but I miss conventions. I miss going out with other professionals, other artists, other writers. I miss the community. I miss that community feeling. I have to say that. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask, because in many cases, with Howard and many others, Chaikin, we were discussing this, and we say the same thing. It's not that we miss conventions per se, it's that we miss sitting down with our friends. We will see once a year, twice a year, sit down and just started chatting, or even better, the serendipity. When you're sitting at dinner with somebody you have made an appointment with, suddenly somebody shows up that you weren't expecting, sits down, and you start talking like the last time you spoke was yesterday, when it was like 3 years ago. And that's what you bring back home, that time with your friends, right?
Right. And it's funny you mentioned Howard, because Howard especially is a great person to talk to. So I miss that a lot.
Yeah, he says he missed the food. He always, every time we talk, like, oh, I miss to be chatting with you about whatever, but especially I miss the food. Like, yeah, of course you miss the food. I'm in Spain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm in Spain. How are you not going to miss the food? It's been a long time for you, since you started doing comics. So I got to ask you this. Why do you keep coming back? Why didn't you just say, you know what, I've had enough of this? What brings you back every time?
I have to tell you, David, there are days when I feel like that. I've had enough, but they're not too often. And I know from experience that feeling will pass. It's like being in a bad mood, or if you get depressed, eventually it's going to lift. But, when I was in my 20s, I thought that I would do this until I was 30. And then I had the opportunity to work with Frank Miller on Daredevil. And I started teaching. And I realized that this was a lot more interesting than I expected. And I had a lot to learn. And I had a lot to discover. And I had a lot to say. So the years, probably you would agree, David, the years go by really fast. And it's been, the industry, or the medium, I should say, the medium has been able to hold my attention,
Mm-hmm.
especially through teaching. That was a real big event in my life.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say about the teaching part. How much do you learn yourself by teaching?
Well, I'll tell you that, I started teaching back, I think, 1990 or 91. And I remember my first class because I was incredibly nervous. Um, and I realized after my first class and my second class that I told them everything that I knew in 6 hours in two classes. So I had to go back and I had to learn and study and create storytelling theories or study composition and study panel to panel relationships and layouts and all those things that we do naturally, but to be able to verbalize them and communicate that to a group of 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds is a challenge. And so when I started to study the medium and study storytelling, I really began to be a better artist as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
And still to this day, even though we're online right now, when I prepare classes, they ask me questions sometimes that I've never even thought of, and I still learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think it's the ability to evolve and progress that keeps me attached to this medium and to comics.
Mm-hmm. How stimulating it is when that happens, when you got a kid or a post-teenager, whatever you're gonna call it, one of your students that asks a question that you don't know the answer for. How stimulating that is for you to see, like, oh, I can still learn.
It is incredibly stimulating, David. And I have to say too that I just taught a class on Monday, so this is fresh in my mind. But I find the ability to reach someone and make them understand something, or the ability to help someone, so incredibly moving
Mm-hmm.
and valuable. And so I sometimes, you think about, not teaching anymore because, it is a pain in the ass. But it's those moments that keep me going, really.
Mm-hmm. Do you consider when you get a script in front of you, or when you write because you've written, what is the thing that instinctively, from the heart, drives you more? You go to the emotion, or you go to the formal aspect of it, to the structure? What is the part that drives you more into a story?
That's a really good question, David. I find that the stories that I relate to the most are about emotion. And usually it's specifically about relationships, family, father, son, mother, parents, children, the dynamics of siblings. All of that really touches me very much. And if I can connect to the story that way, then I know I have a hook into it.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I'm I'm almost mathematical in looking for structure or creating structure. And I believe that without structure, there is nothing. It's just chaos. I think, sometimes I'll tell the kids that if you don't have structure, you're just finger painting.
Mm-hmm.
You're just doing stuff and you're not really organized. So it's those two components that really challenge me and keep me interested in it.
But then so sometimes I tell people that when we talk about Jackson Pollock, they say, well, there was no structure, and I would say there is an order to that chaos. Believe it or not, Pollock knew what he was doing. He wasn't just because. Do you agree on that? That even when it looks chaos, there's got to be a structure behind, or it'll never work.
Oh yes, absolutely, David. If you don't have, another word for structure might be an idea. You have to have an idea. You have to have some sort of concept before you sit down and execute whatever it is that you want to do. So without the structure or without the idea, it doesn't work. And as an example, the students sometimes have a difficult time accepting the fact that if your page layout doesn't work, it's never going to work. The
Absolutely.
page is never, ever going to work.
Absolutely.
And they need to organize the layout of the page in order to make it work. Without that structure, it will never, ever work. It doesn't matter what you do on the page, without that structure of the page layout and the ability to read, left to right or right to left, and the eye flow and clarity, the page will never work. It doesn't matter how much color you put on it or how much texture you put on it. It just isn't going to work.
Yeah, as I always say, as an example to artists too, is listen, this is like when you're building a house. If the base of it,
That's
if
right.
the structure doesn't work, the house is going to fall. Whatever you do, whatever amount of bricks, however nice you paint it, whatever materials you use for the ceiling, whatever, it's going to fucking fall because the structure is wrong. So the layouts are the same, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, David. And that's the example that I try to use often. It is like building a house. Without the foundation, it doesn't matter, what color you paint the house or how many windows you put in. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It will collapse.
Absolutely. I had JR a couple times, Romita Jr., and he told me that when we were talking about the beginning of his career, he said, of course, I knew from the beginning that I was never going to be as good as my father. So I decided I needed to be the best storyteller in the business, to focus on storytelling. How important storytelling is for you as a creator? Do you consider yourself an artist first or a storyteller first?
Oh, I'm a storyteller first. Yeah. And I did listen to that interview, by the way, with John. And just to say, I understand his point about that he's a storyteller, not a illustrator, or not as much of an artist or illustrator as his dad was. But I have to say that my admiration for John's work is really unlimited.
Yes.
I think that he's as good an artist as anyone in the business, and certainly one of the best storytellers there is.
Absolutely.
And what's fascinating about that interview that you did with him, John sometimes, or my experience with John is that he's reluctant to talk about, how he approaches work, because he's very humble and he's very modest. Yeah. And he tells you that, in your interview with him. And so to hear him talk about how he approaches the page and his desire to achieve clarity and storytelling, and where all the characters are and nobody ever gets lost, it was a really interesting opportunity for me to hear how he approached it. And I could not agree with him more. And I wonder sometimes, that it provoked a thought in me, is I wonder if that's one of the reasons why he and I click in terms of penciling and inking, is because I really agree with the decisions that he makes. And I could say it's the same thing with Frank Miller. When we talk about storytelling, we absolutely are on the same page, pardon the pun. But we absolutely agree. And I wonder if there isn't something about that makes a good team.
There's gotta be, because I always say that when a writer and an artist, click, they become a third person. I've always urged editors, never works, but most of the time it doesn't work, to change the credits. When that happens, I always say it shouldn't be writer and artist. It should be both of them. They should be storytellers. That's it. Storytellers, and both people share the title, because that's what you become. And I think it's the same when an artist and when a penciler and an inker click, like you and Frank and JR do. It's got to a point when you are not JR and KLAUS or Frank and KLAUS. You become a third person.
That's right. Yeah.
You don't need to know Frank doesn't need to finish that line or
Yeah.
that detail or JRGR, because the moment you see, what's going to be there, even if he doesn't do it for you. And not the other way around. He knows to not do it, because it's like, oh, he's going to know, because your minds are in sync.
Yeah.
So at that moment, you are not two people. You become a third person.
Right. That's absolutely true, David. And there's something about working with people like Frank or JR, who understand what you understand each other. It provides a security and a safety net for the work, which is extremely helpful and supportive. You know that the other person has your back.
Mm-hmm. I remember some years ago with Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. I was talking about his career. He's a big friend, his family friend, and the inks he had. And we were talking about the work you did with him. And I told him, some people think you guys don't click. And Jose Luis was telling me, for me, it was an honor, to have KLAUS. It was incredible because he gave me something different. And that's exactly what I wanted. I didn't want the usual inks. For that work, I wanted that style. And it became something I didn't expect, but that I loved. How was it for you to work with Jose Luis in that project?
To work with who, David?
Garcia Lopez.
Garcia Lopez, you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought. Look, you know as well as I do, David, that Garcia Lopez is an amazing draftsman, an amazing artist. I look at his work all the time. To say, and maybe this is an overused word, but it's a privilege to work with somebody like that. It's amazing how excellent his work is, and how advanced he is in terms of what he does compared to me, for instance. He's working with Garcia Lopez is it's a step up. There's a phrase where in the US, I think it, where when people get married, they say, "Oh, I'm married up."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what working with Garcia Lopez is. It's I married up when I work with Garcia Lopez. I wish I could work with him more often.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. For you, let's go back to storytelling. I'm sorry, I changed the subject because I just remembered my conversation with Jose Luis and I had to mention it.
Yeah, sure.
And how much he loved your work, by the way.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. He's a man of mystery, David. He says very little.
Yes. No, he's shy and humble, but his heart is bigger than him. He's an amazing human being.
I can see that. I can sense that. Yeah.
So I was going to say, in terms of storytelling, for you, let's compare it to music. For you, telling a story in comics, is it a symphony or is it rock and roll or jazz?
I think it's more of I don't want to dismiss rock and roll because I listen. It's probably my favorite form of music, but I think it is more symphonic. Mm-hmm. Some artists will talk about opera and how similar storytelling, comics, or visual narrative is to opera. I'm not a big opera fan, so I'm not really sure about that. But I definitely think symphony in terms of the highs and lows and the pacing and the rhythm. There was a story that I did, Batman Black and White, a couple of years ago. It was called Good Evening Midnight. Mm-hmm. And I based that on Dear Prudence, the John Lennon song from the Beatle White Album. I was just at that moment so involved and so engrossed by that one track in particular that I realized I could use the structure of that song in the structure of the story. Mm-hmm. And so I structured the story in a similar way to the way Dear Prudence was structured. So music has been a big influence on me, an enormous influence. And I often think that comics or sequential narrative is probably closer to music than it is to film.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think so, David? Do you
Yeah,
agree?
absolutely, absolutely. That's why I always do the comparisons with. I always talk about comics storytelling as science, and we'll get to that. And if you saw the chat, my chat with John, you know I'm going to get to Einstein later. But as science, but also mathematics and music for me is math. Is the same thing because you depend on variations that are mathematical. So for me, it's much closer because you also with music, even people doesn't realize you fill in the gaps. People think that the flow of the music, no, if the music is going to go high and low, your brain is going and following in that direction. And believe it or not, I've realized many times, maybe I'm crazy, well, I'm crazy, but that when the music is going to go lower or higher, your brain already knows and anticipates it. That's how it works, when you're watching a horror movie. Even before they go bump with the music to scare you, stop for a second and watch the movie, and you realize that that bump is going to happen with the music.
No, you're absolutely. I was having. You remind me. I was having a conversation with Juanjo Guanito.
Yes.
You must know Juanjo,
Of
right?
course,
Yeah. And we were talking about because he had a guitar with him, and I play a little bit of guitar, or I used to play a little guitar, and we were talking about how certain chords will just provoke an emotion, just by the chord itself. And it is absolutely true that there are ways of constructing a story that will provoke a certain emotion if you know how to do it well, if you know how to do it correctly. It's fascinating. It's music and sequential narrative and storytelling always involves a certain amount of manipulation of the audience. And that's why I always try to emphasize to students that you need to control the page, or otherwise it's just chaos. You need to have an idea, you need to have a goal, you need to know how to get there. And sometimes you fail, and that's okay, because you learn from that.
It's also about, as I always say, about the people who lives in the journey or the people who lives in the destination. You need to enjoy the journey. You always need to know where the destination is, right?
Yeah. I think, and I'll tell you, personally, David, I always think about the destination, and that's the wrong thing to do. I know it is, and I've tried for 50 years to shake that out of me. I can't do it.
But why did you think it's wrong?
Because you're never in the moment.
Okay.
You're always thinking about where you're going to wind up, or where you're going to be, or when I get there I'll be happy. Instead of being in the moment and enjoying the moment for what it is. It's a big problem for me.
Yeah, but in a way, believe it or not, in a way, since you already know that you want that destination, you're enjoying the journey anyway because you have set your goal. In other cases, I see that people doesn't set the goal, never sets the goal.
Right. Well,
so they can't really enjoy the journey because they don't know where they're going to get. So they are all the time nervous about I'm sorry about my words, but how I'm going to end this. I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right, David, and it's it's a process, as you know. I'll tell you, on that subject, David, just to say, I found that one of the most important things, both personally as a human being and as an artist or storyteller or communicator, the most important thing that you can embrace or try to do is to be self-aware. You have to understand who you are, how you operate, what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, and try to navigate, through all of that it really is important to be self-aware. Extremely important for me, anyways. It's
No,
been,
absolutely, absolutely, because being self-aware also helps you improve. I mean,
yeah,
you've been in this business for many years, and as you saw, in my two conversations with John, that was also part of the conversation. The need to evolve, the need to keep changing.
that's right.
That is also part of not getting bored, of course, with what you do, but it's also part of you need to keep learning. You need to keep,
That's right.
and that involves self-awareness. So in a way, that's also why all of the artists, at least the good ones like you, by the end of the day, you look at the page, and you're always going to find something that you don't like.
Sure.
Always.
Yeah.
And the next day, it's like, okay, I need that. I know there's something that I need to improve. And even with all the years, I can bet right now that that still happens to you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And if it doesn't, then that's the point when I would stop.
Yeah.
And let me say also, in talking about John, we just did a year or a year and a half run on Action Comics. We're probably going to be doing a run on Batman, I hope. And I've worked with him for, I think the first job we did together was probably 30 years ago, somewhere around there. So I've worked with him, throughout the years at certain points. And he has, amazingly so, become a better artist.
Mm-hmm.
There were shots and angles in Action Comics that I've never seen, that he wouldn't have used 20 or 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm amazed at that. I'm truly, I want to call him up and say, how did you do that shot? How did you get that angle? That's amazing. But I know he's too embarrassed, so I don't want to bug him with that. He's too humble. But it's really true. John has evolved and become better and better and better as time goes by.
And you too, again, because of the same reason.
Thanks. Yeah, I really hope so, David.
Yeah, no. If you hadn't, you couldn't be in this industry. Remember, this industry eats you and then it spits you out.
Well, that is that is true.
So if you weren't able to keep up, to improve, to be able to adapt your style to other artists, to do your own stuff, it comes to a moment when the industry just eats you and you disappear. You hadn't. That means you're still getting better.
Well, thanks, David. I really hope
as I will say, let's go back to science and facts. You're still there, so that means you've improved leaps and bounds, and I still love your work because of that reason. One silly question maybe.
No,
when you are in the process of creating a page, being as a writer, as an artist, layouting or inking, do you need absolute science like quietness? Or music, podcast, whatever, or it depends on the phase of the work. I mean, for example, Olivier Coipel explained to me that when he's doing the layouts, he needs quiet, like absolutely no sound, because as we said, that's the foundation. That's when he's building the page. So it's like everything has to be in place. So concentration. Then when he goes to inks, maybe some music. When he colors, the same thing, and then he adapts the music he listens to depending on the kind of scene. Meaning.
Sure.
Epic. Okay, so I need Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, something like that, or romance. So I need, classic music, romantic music, French from the 19th century. So he thinks that imbues his brain and makes the pages better. As we said, the relation between music and storytelling in comics. What's the way you work with?
I think probably very similar to a lot of artists, including Olivier. When I'm doing layouts and when I'm doing, constructing a page and putting the images in the panels, I do need quiet because it's very, very, as you know, David, it's very, you have to really concentrate. You have to think. You have to really figure out what works and what doesn't work. Once you get that down, then I can listen to almost anything when I'm penciling, or certainly when I'm inking, because when I'm inking, I can sort of just turn it on. It's almost automatic. It's funny. I was thinking the other day that because I was laying out some pages, and I just needed something to, to remind me that I haven't died. So I'll put on like ambient, just like a drone or something, just something to remind me that I'm still here. If as long as I hear it, I figure, okay, I'm still alive, I'm still working. But yeah, when I'm laying out a page, it has to be really quiet and not intrusive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. How, how much you think? I always put this example to pattern recognition is important for comics as an art.
I think that's a very underrated and understated part of comics.
Yeah.
And pattern recognition is a much bigger concept or deal in painting, like Jackson Pollock, for instance.
Yep.
As you mentioned. But yeah, pattern recognition, that's fascinating. I'm not sure I'm equipped to say anything more than that, but I agree with you. It's a big part of storytelling.
Of course, you are equipped to talk about that. Let's keep talking about it. No, I always say it because, of course, I know I love very detailed art. I always clarify this first so people doesn't think I hate Brian Hitch or Travis Charest or any other artist. I love that intricate art, but I always felt that with comics, when there's a space for the reader to interpret what's there, and I always go to the caves. There's a bush. The bush is moving. Run, because there's probably an animal that is going to kill you. And
Right.
that atavic, that thing is still in our brain. So that's when, and then we get, people seeing Jesus Christ in loaves of bread, which is, we have the right pattern recognition and the wrong one. But I think that for comics, we are manipulators. Yes, as creators, we have to manipulate our audience, but we always have to leave a space for them to be a part of the journey. And that's pattern recognition. Don't complete that. As John also told me, that's why he loves Batman so much. He does this, and this is the shape of Batman. And everybody knows that's the shape of Batman. You don't have to draw anything else.
Yeah.
So for me in comics, many times I see a page and I say, we don't need that much. Just leave the reader be involved. Let him enjoy by grabbing him and making him recognize what is there.
Well, that's it, and I know you know this, David, but one of the wonderful things about comics, or about this particular medium as opposed to film, is that it does require or allow the audience to participate. Because in film, there is no audience participation. The film scrolls and goes on regardless of the participation of the audience.
Yes.
But the audience in sequential narrative, in comic books, does participate. They can go back, they can go forward, they can slow down, they can go fast. So there is a lot of participation in comics, which I really, really enjoy, that part of it. But you remind me, in pattern recognition can be, can involve, for instance, having 3 panels on one tier, and you understand that those 3 panels belong together. There's a pattern, just by establishing those 3 panels on one tier. It's a reflexive recognition on the part of the audience, but also pattern recognition, when I think about it, also involves texture and being able to use a certain specific texture on a tree as opposed to a shirt, or even a flannel shirt, the pattern on a flannel shirt. So it's important to give the shapes and the objects in your panel identity. Yes. And that is part of pattern recognition also, so that the reader never gets lost or confused.
And also the abstraction of reality. I mean, you were talking about the tree, and I always say there's people who shows you pages, new artists, and I always yell at them and say, stop fucking fucking copying trees you've seen in a comic book. Look out the window.
Yeah.
Learn how that tree works. Learn how the branches move, how a leaf will fall, and then we go back to pattern recognition. If in a page, in a panel, you just put a dry, as you said with the texture, a dry leaf flying this way, you're saying this scene is happening in the fall.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't need to say anything else. You just said by pattern recognition and by texture, you just told your reader without text, without anything else.
Yeah.
This story is happening in the fall.
Yeah. And I have to, David, that's the kind of thing that kept me in comics for all this time. Because it is so interesting and it is so fascinating to be able to make those choices and to be able to, manipulate the audience and do it in a subtle way so that they don't even know, what you're doing, but it does impact them. It impacts them in terms of how they read and how they enjoy it and whether they're confused or whether things are clear.
Yeah, but because you are involving them, as you just said, you're telling them with that leaf or whatever example you can think of, you're telling the reader he has to instantly interpret what's on the page. It's not, as you said, this is a movie, scrolling. You're not active, you're passive. You're reading a novel, you're not active, you're passive. You just have to move on.
Right.
But in comics, at every turn, and that now is when I go to Einstein. As I always said, comics is the only art who can manipulate the theory of relativity because you control time and space.
Right.
But even if you control, go please.
No, I was just going to say that sometimes some of the most interesting stuff happens in between panels. Happens in the gutter. That's where the audience participates. It's fascinating.
Exactly. And that's when you're telling the audience to participate without any words, is in that image, in that space, when they have to connect. And as I always say, that's the comic reader's superpower. And that what I think comics should be taught from primary school. Because that way of reading, ascertain what happens between the panels, the typical example. Clark Kent does this, next panel, sure. Clark Kent is flying.
Sure.
We cover all the gaps in between.
Yes, that's right.
And then that makes us as readers, and I keep saying this, when we watch a movie, when we're watching a TV show, when we're reading a novel, when you're watching the news, when you're reading a newspaper, comic readers always automatically try to read between the lines. We always try to look for the second layer, even if it's not there, because that's what we have learned to do as comic readers. And that's why I say comic storytelling should be taught in primary school, because that way tells you so many things about how to interpret life and how to interpret patterns that is important in any other aspect of life. What do you think about that? Or I'm crazy, so maybe you don't agree.
No, David, you're absolutely right. I don't think I disagree with anything you're saying, but and I'll just to prove that you are right, or to emphasize the fact that you are correct. I learned how to read through comics. I was an immigrant. I came over to this country when I was like 4.5, and I couldn't speak English. And I discovered comics at the local store near my house, and I was able to put the words together with the images. And I have to say that I think that is, I could make a joke and say that scarred me for life, in a good way. But I think that really is the origin of my interest and fascination with communicating. And I think that to a large degree, and this is part of my being self-aware, but I think to a large degree, not only was that pivotal for me, but the desire to be understood, the desire to communicate is at the foundation of my interest in storytelling. I don't think I was particularly understood as a child, either by my school or by my family. And that really laid the foundation. There's a real incredibly strong desire within me to be understood.
Yeah.
And I think that really is, that's the origin of my desire to be a communicator and storyteller.
And you just said that's your secret origin as a storyteller. But why did you decide it was comics? I mean, of all the chances you had, the opportunities, animation, comics, any other ways of storytelling, what made you say comics is my life? This is what I want to do.
It is amazing how much luck plays into this, and how much I've been thinking a lot about fate lately, and I don't know if certain things are fated, or if there is such a thing as fate. But when I look back at my path or my trajectory, I realize that without certain events that were luck, I would not be here.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your question, David? I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No. I was saying that I was loving what you were saying. By the way, I was saying that you just told us your secret origin about why you love to be a storyteller.
Yeah.
But of all the opportunities, different paths you could have taken, comics, animation,
right,
or any other type of storytelling, why did you decide, or your heart told you, this is what I have to do? Comics is my life.
When we came to America. As I think any typical immigrant family, it was extremely difficult to establish yourself. So we were, fairly poor, certainly, and comics was an affordable thing for me. They were a dime, they were 10 cents. So not only did I learn how to read and write through comics, which was by itself enough of a pivotal event to turn me into a certain direction, but it was affordable. It was a dime, and it was handy. It came out every week. And it was just convenient. So, maybe there was a little bit of fate in there too, a little bit of luck. But I realized, what I did when I was a kid, I would buy comics and then I would cut them apart. So I would cut the Superman out and Lois Lane or Jimmy Olsen or Batman, whatever it was, and I would scotch tape them and make new stories out of those figures. And I realized, this is insanity because I'm destroying all of my comics. So I started to draw. And that's how I started to draw comic books because I wanted to hang on to the books rather than cut them apart. But there was always a desire to communicate. There was always a desire to be creative. Even when I cut the comics apart and made them into, new stories or different stories, the basic impetus or the motivation was still to storytell.
Mm-hmm.
And so at a certain point, I just stopped cutting them apart and I started drawing them.
Mm-hmm. There's why do you decide to write? I mean, we know an image is worth 1,000 words, of course, and you're an artist primarily. Why did you decide I need to write certain stories?
I feel that, definitely it's part of the evolution. You can't stand still. So there's always a desire to improve. I mean, when I started working in comics, I was an inker. Mm-hmm. And it took me about 10 years or so to start really, maybe a little bit longer, to start really penciling. And even when I was an inker, I tried to evolve and add coloring to the work that I was inking on Frank or on John Buscema, Carmine Infantino, Gil Kane. So I started coloring my own work. And so step by step, I increased, I think, my interest in the medium. Mm-hmm. I increased my capabilities. And also, David, this is a business. I think one of the um, characteristics of longevity is to do more than one thing.
Yes.
And to
Don't
have,
ever have all your eggs in a single basket. Yes, of course.
yes, so you understand what I'm saying, David, right?
Oh,
You have more than one thing to offer. And so if I don't get inking work, I can get penciling work, or vice versa. But in addition to the practical kind of application to broadening your scope or your what you can offer,
yeah.
I think it's just a desire not to stand still and a desire. Last year I spent the summer, not 2020 but 2019. I spent the summer learning digital. And it was really hard for me. It was because I have an analog brain, it was really, really fucking hard, man. And even though I got to just, I just put my foot in the door and I just kind of can use it, and clean the pages and correct the pages and draw a little bit, it was a big breakthrough for me. And that was also part of, just not standing still. I know that if I want to be happy, that I have to keep on going forward.
Absolutely. You just mentioned coloring. Let me ask you another strange question. As you see, I love to do weird questions. Have you ever thought about sounds as colors?
Say it again. Have I ever thought what?
As colors as sounds?
Sound?
Yeah, in your head, when you think about a color, you interpret it as the sound that because for me, and I'm not talking about synesthesia and anything like that. Like for me, colors, especially flat colors, but in general, give me the sound that comics don't have. Because people says comics, one problem comics have, I don't agree, is that they don't have sound. And I was like, but for me, colors have sound. It's in the color. The colors add the sound. A big red is telling you that loud music.
That's David.
Hot color, cold color is telling you different things. So
that's a very interesting relationship, and I don't think I've literally thought about that, but I will from now on. And I think you're right. The red is certainly horns or the drums or the symphony making a big noise. I think you're right. I mean, when I color, I certainly think about highs and lows or hot and cold. But to actually identify it as a sound, that's an interesting thing. I will pursue that.
Yeah, what I mean in this case is, for example, you see that you want to go with an impact moment.
Yeah.
And then that impact moment in my head reads like a sound, even if it's not literally. I'm not saying think of it as a sound literally, but instinctively, your brain, as we were saying before, relationship between music and comics, your brain is interpreting it as a sound because it's saying this has to be loud or this has to be, emotional, soothing for the reader. So it's the music of the brain.
Right. And a big panel is a big sound. Small panels are smaller. David, I have to. I this may be a little off the subject, but I was trying to figure out the other day, and I'm still wondering about it. How is it possible that your brain can create music, not write music, but you can hear a song in your head? How is that possible? How can a brain, it's like, I don't know what your favorite song is or what song you can think of, but you can hear it in your head, right? You hear the melody, you hear the words. So your brain is making music. It's just amazing. I don't know how the brain can do that. It's incredible.
I can give you my theory.
Go ahead. I'd like to hear it.
Hypothesis. I always differentiate because people think theory is not proven. Yes, theory is proven. It's the same as a law, blah, blah, blah. Hypothesis is why not proven. So it's an hypothesis. Mine is your brain selects the kind of noises or sounds it likes. what is soothing against what is jarring, what is like, oh, like a scratching on a
Yeah.
board. You react
Right.
like that. So that is not going to stay in your brain because it is a voice set. But the diagram of sounds that your brain likes tends to go together, tends to unite in your brain. So that kind of sounds you keep hearing is like a song that you don't like, but you can't get off your head. I was explaining that in pop music now, and that's one of the reasons I hate it, like 60, 70% of the musicians, the most famous musicians, like Taylor Swift and all those, they have this fucking same producer.
That's
So
right.
it's exactly the same sound.
Yeah.
And those guys, mathematically, again, they
That's right.
know the sounds that work with your brain. So those patterns are repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated in that kind of music. You just have to stop and listen to the music and see when at a certain point of the song that goes loud, that goes low, that instrument is used. So they use those patterns. They know they work in your brain.
Right.
So you
Right.
can do the music in your brain because your brain, again, by pattern recognition,
Right.
knows the sounds it likes. So they put them together. Your brains put them together, and that's how you create a song.
Yeah. It's you're talking about algorithms and pattern recognition and all those things that we are subjected to, in the 21st century. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And it goes again. It's your brain doing the math, what creates the song, even if we don't know we're doing the math. And then those guys use that math that knows it. They know it works with your brain to create those songs that look like photocopies.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So they use our brain structure to manipulate us to like those songs.
That's right.
If I say, I hate that song. Oh my God, I hate that fucking song. But 5 seconds later, you're saying, I can't get it off my head. I just can't.
That's right.
Because they're using that algorithm or that math from your brain
Yeah.
that they know is going to make you keep tuning it. And you're like, fuck, I hate it. Why cannot get it out of my
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I find it also so interesting. Yeah.
Again, it's what we said. It's the relation, I always said, the relation between comics, music, math, and science. And that's the reason they called it the schools of arts and sciences. Now, when people talks about separating art and science, oh, I am not a science guy, or I am not an art guy. I was, but they are the same. You cannot do art without the structure. That's math. You cannot do, music without the structure. That's math. Always, when you want to do art, you need to lean on the structure. You need to lean on the math of it. You need to lean on the physics. If you want to use a certain kind of brush or pen and you choose a paper that is too thin, you know what? It's going to break. That's physics.
That's right.
So by the end of the day, it's always one takes you to the other.
That's right. Yeah. It's fascinating, David. I agree with you. I'm just, just impressed with the brain. I find it, it's an incredible, it's an incredible organ, I guess.
It's the unknown that we don't know how far it can get. But as comics, as I always say, and I was talking to Scott McCloud about this for like 3 hours, and our conclusion in the end was, you know what? Comics have no limits. It's any other art, there's an envelope. You cannot get off the envelope. Movies work a certain way, novels are a certain way. Comics don't. Every new generation is going to come, or every new artist like John, we were talking about yourself. You evolve, you break the limits. Every time you evolve, every time somebody tells you cannot do that, a new comic artist is going to come and say, a new generation is going to come and say, what?
Yeah.
It's like, who says you can't do that? Let's change the format. You cannot do that in movies. Let's change the subject. Let's change the way we tell a story. Let's tell a story for 20 pages that is on the same second. What other art allows you to do that?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think don't you think, David, we're in a very creative period for comics right now?
Absolutely. Sometimes when people tell me, you were mentioning the comics being a dime, before. Sometimes people tell me, oh, that killed comics when they became expensive. Then I would say, I don't agree. That's, as an artist, it's evolution. Comics evolved to get a different readership that grew up with the comics.
Yeah.
You didn't evolve, comics would have probably died. As if movies stopped, saying we are going to be silent forever. Let's not add sound. You have to change and evolve, because if you don't,
Right.
as an art form, you die, or photography or whatever. So I think it's the same thing. Do you think that the price tag has changed comics for the worse, or do you agree with me that it's just evolution and we're going in the direction our audience is asking us to go?
I think that history has proven that it's an evolution, and that there was a period of time, I'm sure you know this, in the 70s and the 80s and 90s, when every 5 years, every couple of years, there was a prediction that comics would disappear.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And I think they won't. At this point, I think we're healthier than we've ever been.
Absolutely.
In spite of, some of the corporate foot on our creative necks.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think there's the field, the comics have become much more diverse and much more interesting. Business opportunities have increased. Creator-owned work. All sorts of different options. There used to be a feeling in the industry that if one of the big companies went under, the other one would go under automatically. That's no longer true.
No.
Marvel could disappear and DC could still continue publishing, or vice versa.
Absolutely.
So I think it is definitely evolved, and we're very healthy in that respect. And I'm not worried about comics having a future.
Yeah, I know what you said about. Well, let me. It's getting dark here already. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
I was saying that the corporate food you mentioned, in a way, in an expected way, I think it's going to benefit us too. Let me explain. Suddenly, the higher echelons at DC, Warner, AT&T, whatever, they decide, let's get out of Diamond for whatever reason. I'm not going to judge or say it's right or wrong. But at the same time, that creates a big gap on Diamond. Diamond, as a distributor, says, oh, almost half of my money is gone. How am I going to survive? Of course, then they have to push Image, they have to push Dark Horse, they have to push Boom Studios and others. So all that terrain they lost with DC is covered. Who helps that? That helps the creators, because Boom, aside of some licenses, Dark Horse, aside of some licenses, and all of Image is creator owned.
Yeah.
So by the end of the day, Diamond as a company needing to make the money back.
Yeah.
For that corporate food is an unexpected but benefiting thing for creators.
Yeah. You're right, David. One of the things that I've learned in the many years that I've been in this business is that there is a slot for a comic book.
Yeah.
And if that comic book is canceled, another one takes its place.
Yeah.
That slot is always going to be there, whether it's Spider-Man or a creator-owned book or, something from Image or Dark Horse, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. That slot is there, and something will eventually fill it.
Absolutely.
And I've seen that happen over and over. Do you agree, David?
Absolutely. And also there's a detail that changes things in this generation, I think, and going again to the creator own, is creators grow up reading certain things. You get used to, I've always read corporate comics, so that's what I do. Oh, I've grown up reading, Frank. Oh, Frank, at a certain moment, he didn't go and do his own thing. So you see, oh, you can do that. Right now, people that is growing up, the kids are reading, I've seen a lot of people doing creator own.
Right.
So they grow up thinking, this is what I want to do. It's not
right. That's right.
Like it was, oh, you can only do Marvel or DC.
Right.
That was the door. Right. That was the door. Right now, people grows up seeing the other opportunities. So more and more, it's like the dog that wags his own tail.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. Right now, people sees, oh, I have this chance, this other chance, this other chance. I can go in this direction, and it's going to work for me. So even as you said, a new Spider-Man, a new something, there's another bonus now, which is, even if it's not a Spider-Man, if it's not me, Marvel, I'm not the guy who can work at Marvel or the guy who can work at DC because of style, because of the type of stories they want to tell. There's another space for you, which wasn't there 10 years ago, right?
I remember reading. You're absolutely right, David, and I would encourage young artists and young creative people to have faith and to understand that their product and what they want to do, or their career that they want to enter, is going to be there. I remember reading an article maybe 10, 15 years ago where Francis Ford Coppola was being interviewed, and he pointed out that in the years to come, which is the years we are in now, of course, that people will be making movies in their basement because everyone will have the technology to do so. And he was absolutely right. And the same applies to comic books. If you really want to make a comic book and you really have that passion to storytell, you can make a comic book on your own. You don't need Marvel, you don't need DC, you don't need Image. You can do it by yourself. And there are ways of doing it. And that will never disappear.
Absolutely. And also, as I always repeat to new artists or new writers, editors love to see people who finishes things. Start, keep working, finish your story, be it online, be it on paper, be it on a fanzine, I don't care. Finish it. That's the thing you can show. Either to do a creator own professionally, either to do in a webcomic, in webtoons, even Marvel, DC. Finish things. Work. As you said, this is an iPhone. You know what? The keynotes we've seen this year, they were all fucking shot in iPhones. They shot them in iPhones, so you can do that.
Yeah.
You can do that. It's the same in comics. You just said it. There's so many venues right now.
That's right.
To do your own comics. That when people tells me, "Oh, but I can't because I don't have the way," I will say that's a lie. That means you don't want it enough. And if you don't want it enough, stop.
That's right.
If
And
you
that
want
goes
enough,
back.
you will do it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I was just going to say, it goes back to being self-aware.
Yeah.
Are you going to throw obstacles in your way? Are you going to sabotage yourself? Are you going to use excuses, for your failure? Or are you going to address that, and overcome them? You only need a piece of paper and a pencil.
Yeah, there's no, again, the same thing with excuses. There's no budget except, you have to eat, of course. There's no, this FX is going to cost this much. This setup is going to cost this much. This location is going to, no, it's all in your brain. It's all in your head.
That's right.
Yeah. That's your budget limitation. So
that's right.
That's finished working. One last thing, and then we go to the fan questions before they kill me.
Sure.
You've played with every character, almost every character in the sandbox, in the corporate sandbox. I'm pretty sure people is gonna ask what is your favorite character, blah blah blah. That's not my question here. Is when are you going to do your own thing?
That's a good question. That is part of my evolution, and probably my biggest insecurity is my ability to plot. I think I'm an okay writer. I could write a scene, but plotting a bigger story has been a challenge for me. I'm a bit shaky about that. But I am involved in a creator-owned project called Sacred Creatures, which is the first volume came out in 2017, 2018 at Image.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that with my collaborator, Pablo Ramundi. And so I lean on him for plotting and writing a bit. And we come up with a story together. He does his, it's a parallel storyline where it's both flashbacks and contemporary. So he does all the contemporary art. I do all of the flashback art. we co-write it together, and we're working on the second volume right now, and that'll be out in the spring. But so in that way, some of that itch, is scratched. But I do hope to eventually, write something on my own. I mean, I've written short stories, but it's the larger overarching plot that really I don't think I'm very good at. So I'm working on trying to get better on that. Yeah.
It's as we said, the challenging part and the evolution that you will eventually get there, right? That's the next step.
Yeah, fingers crossed, David. That's a there's something, it's just been it's been a difficult nut for me to crack. Yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, all nuts get cracked. All of them. I'm not looking, Anyway.
I'm going to put that on my business card.
Okay, let's go. So, Felipe Brel, hello everyone. Hola todo el mundo. Javier Meson, hi, I'd like to ask Mr. Janson, what it's like to work as an inker for John Romita Jr. in Superman Action Comics, in this case, and other comics. In a way, you've answered this already. So,
well, I have so much respect for John's work. And let me say this: when pages come in from John, I look at the pages, like I do at every ink job. I always look at the pages for as long as I can before I start inking them. Try to get the feel of it. And then when I actually sit down to ink John's work, I not only see John Romita Jr. on the pages, but I see John Romita Sr., I see John Buscema, I see Jack Kirby, I see Gene Colan. There are sometimes when John uses the side of the pencil, it reminds me of inking Gene Colan. So he has, and I don't want to embarrass him because I know he is so humble, but he has the DNA of decades of artists that have come before him. So when I work with him and I get to ink his pages, I feel like this is not a guy who just fell off the truck yesterday. This is a guy who deserves respect, deserves an acknowledgement of how much knowledge and information he carries in his work. And it's truly, really a privilege to work with somebody that has that wide a range of influences and capabilities.
Yeah.
And I've inked Gene Colan, I've inked John Buscema. So when I feel like I'm in a position to talk authoritatively about that, but I see that influence in John's work, and I feel like I'm connected to a larger universe.
Yeah, it is pretty frustrating to me when people, dismiss as part of John's work, like, in the last Action Comics or something. And I always go back and say, you don't know how much he's studied comics. You don't know how much he's studied other artists. You don't know how much, in every stroke, you can see how much he's cared for the art form.
That's
how
right.
much, being a young kid, he went through everybody else's pages, not his dad, aside of his dad, of course.
Yeah.
He was studying John Buscema. He was studying Gene Colan. He was studying Gil Kane. He was studying blah, 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 blah. And then he created that cauldron of things that is unique, that is John Romita Jr.
That's right.
It's there. It's still there. In his every evolution, you can go back, as you said, to that stroke and say, oh, that is Gene.
Yeah. And let me say, and you're totally correct, but let me say if I see a head that reminds me of Gene Colan, it's not that John intended to do that.
No,
it just comes out.
Absolutely.
And, it's unconscious on his part. And let me say also about, the criticism that John gets. It's usually it's always about, say, they don't like the way he draws faces, or his bodies are too blocky, or it's always about the way. And I mean this. So I want to slow down when I say this. I mean this in a very specific and important way. The criticism that he gets is always about what things look like, not what things do. People don't understand when you're 14 years old or 15 years old or 20 years old. If you're a civilian and you don't know about storytelling and art, you're going to focus on the things that are on the surface.
Yes, exactly.
And so that's what his criticism is about. It's about things that are on the surface. I don't like his style, or I don't like the way he draws faces. But they don't have the education to understand what he's really doing. What is he doing with his figures and his composition and his storytelling? Absolutely. So I tend to I get a little bit of annoyed. I understand it because I was 14 once too, and I get that. But I think that it's incredibly uninformed opinion and unfair.
And the part that I don't get a bit annoyed, I get really annoyed. So, and I express it also because by the end of the day, it doesn't take 5 seconds to inform yourself. Inform yourself before barking. We are in the internet era where barking is very easy. We know that, but you're barking and you don't know what you're barking about.
Yes, it's true, David. And this is the culture that we live in now, because of social media. Everybody has an opportunity to bark. I think that's a good word. And, we're stuck with it. We just have to, people like yourself and myself, we have to, I think, inform and educate the people that are barking.
Absolutely. It's just slow down, look at it, or in 2 years you will regret what you just said. It's just stop, just check out the bases, just check the storytelling, just the compositions, and then when you study all that, come back to me and talk about the figures.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you know what? When they have checked and stopped and look at that, they don't care about the figures anymore.
That's right.
They understand.
Right. That's right. That is exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, Thaya said, even behind my keyboard, I feel nervous, so I will just say it. Thank you for everything, Mr. Janson.
You're very welcome. I appreciate that very much, and I love you.
Thaya, he loves you. He's also an amazing artist. Javier Meson, how was drawing Daredevil during Frank Miller's time in the series? I guess he means when Frank was leaving you less and less detail pencils for you to do, and then after Frank left the book.
That period of time, it's often there's so much really to say about that period of time. But I'll say this, that when Frank and I get together now, there's always one moment when we get together where each one of us will say, man, that was really a lot of fun. Frank will often say, we were on fire at that point. Turning out a monthly book, penciling, inking, coloring, writing, it was amazing, an amazing time. That work still holds up. And, I will say I'll be eternally grateful for the trust and the faith that Frank had in me to contribute, to his work and to the book. I think we both benefited enormously from that experience, both career-wise and also artistically.
Yeah.
That was really, I think, to a large degree, a very pivotal point for me. Working with Frank on Daredevil and then teaching; those were two really life-changing events for me.
Walter Vázquez says, I'm sorry, I just speak Spanish. Don't worry. No te preocupes, yo traduzco. Don't worry, he translate. But I love the inks he's always done. So powerful on Frank Miller. They were really important to me and beautiful. Thank you, David, and thank you, Klaus.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. I really do. I'm extremely grateful. Thank you.
Javier Meson asks, your last work published as a cartoonist in Spain has been Batman White Knight Presents Bone Freeze. Have you considered, well, he already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
Have you considered making a comic book with a character of your own creation? Yes.
Yes, that is Sacred Creatures, and hopefully more in the future. Yeah.
Okay, Blake Roybal, what kind of inking tools do you generally use, and how long have you used them?
The kind of tools that I've used, that I'm using, have expanded. But I will use, to get into the weeds, I will use a Raphael brush, number 4, number 5. I will use a 103 Hunts mapping pen. All of the Hunts mapping pen is available through Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a nib, and it's a rather flexible nib. I'll use a Japanese nib for doing straight lines, the G nib, I think it is. Also, there's another nib that's a Japanese nib that I use. And that's basically it. I'll use Sumi ink, which is not too thick, because really thick ink will just destroy the brush. It'll separate the fibers. So I've been able to use the same brush or the same brushes the exact same specific brush for maybe a year or so, which is a very long time for a brush to last. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Felipe González Hernández asks, hi, Mr. Janson, your inking is amazing, and also your work as a penciler. Do you like to draw comic books more than inking them? For me, your inking is like your drawing. You put all your heart and style on it.
Oh, thanks. I do very much appreciate that. I certainly try to do that. But penciling versus inking, it's an interesting question. I think that penciling is more challenging, and it requires more thought on my part anyways. And I find that penciling, there are problems to solve in penciling that are bigger than the problems that need to be solved in inking, because a lot of times the penciler has already figured out those problems. Mm-hmm. So the problems that an inker or myself come across are smaller than the problems that you need to solve when you pencil a page. So I find penciling, and I feel like I'm betraying a mistress, but I find penciling to be more interesting and challenging than inking, yeah. Mm-hmm. But I love inking. I love it. It's great fun.
Mm-hmm. It just occurred to me.
Sure.
Inking or finishing? What is more fun for you?
Anytime I can contribute more, it is more fun. Mm-hmm. So finishing is more fun. When I've worked on John Buscema's type pencils and breakdowns, which is, I can hardly believe that I had the chance to do that. But yeah, the breakdowns were much more challenging, much more interesting. You really get to see, I think, the way the artist thinks. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but breakdowns or finishes are more interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Victor Herrera Q, hi from Colombia, Mr. Janson. Is there a writer you wish you work with or still hope to work with in the future?
First of all, I'd love to work with Grant Morrison again. We did Gothic a couple of years ago. I thought that was a really terrific project for me. I thought Daredevil End of Days by Brian Michael Bendis and David Mack was extraordinarily well written. I loved that project. I would love to work with Chip Zdarsky.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to work with Matt Fraction. I would, I would cut off my left arm if I had a chance to work with Ed Brubaker. Yeah, people like that. I'm doing a short story with Matt Kint, which I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, I think those writers would be on the top of my list. Yeah,
I will give them a call.
please do.
I will. Believe me, I will. Blake
No.
Royal asks, which John Romita Jr. collaboration is the one you are most proud of?
That's a tough one. And when John and I, bump into each other at conventions or so, we'll talk about that every once in a while, and it changes, depending on what time of the year it is. I have a fondness for, I think Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe right up there would be the run we did on Thor, surprisingly enough. I thought when we were doing Spider-Man that I would hate it because of all the lines, on his costume. And I found myself really enjoying it because you could actually, if you use the lines in a certain way, the webbing, you can define his shape.
Mm-hmm.
And create volume. And I thought, wow, this is an amazing costume design. This is incredible. Really quite something. Yeah.
Pattern recognition again.
That's right. That's exactly right. In without hitting you over the head with it either. It's a very subtle, nuanced thing. But I think Spider-Man and maybe Thor and yeah. Yeah,
I honestly always thought it could be Thor because that book felt that you guys were having crazy fun. I remember, also Dan Jurgens was here, and he told me that when he started talking to John about the book, and John just said, if I recall correctly, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong here, said, look, Thor is one of the days of the week has his name. We got to reflect that. We got to reflect, Thursday. We got to reflect. Yeah. He's a fucking god. How important, how strong he is. We gotta go nuts with it. So it always felt to me, from that point of view, for Dan, for you, and for John, that you guys were just having crazy fun. Just going crazy with the book.
Yeah, you're totally correct. Thor was when I think about the work we did on Thor, it was big. It was just big.
Yeah,
I like that.
Okay, Mike Perkins. Hello, Mike. Our friend artist Mike Perkins.
So good to see you.
I learned how to ink studying King KLAUS work on Logan's Run, and I was considered as solely an inker for a while, even though I had begun my career doing everything. Did KLAUS enter as a Renaissance man, or was inking his initial goal?
No, what happened was, and Mike, thanks. I look forward to the next time I see you. But what happened was, I think I was about 18 or 19, somewhere around there, and I went to a convention in New York, a Phil Suling con that was across the street from Madison Square Garden, and I had a couple of pages that I had penciled and inked, and Gil Kane was coming out of the ballroom, and I just went up to him, like a rude fan. And I showed him these pages and I asked him for a critique, and I mean, he was just standing there, with people around him. It was so rude of me. And Gil looked at them and he said, oh, well, my boy, this isn't bad. You've got to work on this. You've got to work on that. And I asked him, I said, well, how long do you think I have to go until I can, make a living? And he said, well, maybe 2 years. And then I said to him, well, how long do you think I would have to go to get an ink job? And he said, oh, maybe a year. So immediately I figured, oh, okay, I can get in sooner inking. And that was the reason why I started focusing on inking. I really wanted to, my family lived in Connecticut, and I really wanted to move to New York. I wanted to get my career off the ground. I had a job at McDonald's, for a summer, and I hated that. So I took his advice and I focused on inking. And so I entered the comics as an inker. And I did that for about 10 years, I think, maybe a little bit longer, before I started penciling again.
Luis P. Videos, which one of your works is the one you feel most proud of, and who's your favorite superhero?
I think probably my best pencil job was probably Daredevil End of Days. I really thought that was a really good job. Gothic was also a good job. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think the work I'm doing on Sacred Creatures, the creator-owned book, is interesting because it's different. So I'm trying different things. Also, a little bit more digital. So that's interesting. But I think probably my favorite characters are, no big surprise, Batman and Daredevil. And I feel lucky to have been able to work on those characters. But part of the reason why I like those two characters is because they're more relatable to me. They don't have superpowers. Although I would love to pencil Superman. I think I have a great version of Superman in my head. And I also like the environment that Batman and Daredevil are in. Gotham is a very interesting character, and New York City is an interesting character. Try to capture that. I like architecture. I like buildings. I like environments. And on the other hand, I can easily tell you, or I can tell you that I could easily do a story that takes place in the jungle or in the woods. I like that too. So, but Batman and Daredevil are probably my favorite characters. Yeah.
No, not Tarzan then?
No, Tarzan. I inked John Buscema on Tarzan. It was a blast. It was wonderful.
But you had enough of that, right?
Okay. It's those damn monkeys, David.
Gordon Cole. Hello, David and Klaus. Great show, David. Thank you. To Klaus, do you have any European artists on your radar right now besides Alfonso Font?
On my radar, I like Paul Guillaume very much. But I have to say, Juanjo Guarnido, I like his work incredibly. I thought, when I first came across Black Sad, I was just knocked out by it. And after that, I had the pleasure of meeting him. So that was that was a bonus for me. But I think Alfonso Font is without a doubt my favorite non-American or European artist. I have as much of his work as I can get, always around me, and I always look at it every day. Gil Kane is my favorite American artist. Big influence on me. But Alfonso Font is, I find his work to be amazing. Yeah.
Let me see. Daniel Ureña. Oh, hello from Costa Rica, Mr. Janson.
Thank you. Hello.
Javier González Delgado, Spidey, Gothic DD, DKR. Your work is a very important part of my library. Have you been or are you inspired by some manga or Japanese artists? Thank you for all, Mr. Janson. Met you in Madrid a few years ago. Well,
thank you very much. Because of teaching, the students are very heavily manga influenced. They're of that age, and they have really turned me on to manga in general. anime, of course, and that's been I have decided and that I will make the effort to try and incorporate some of that into my work.
Mhm.
What's interesting, I think, about manga is the way they show action and the way they show drama, and the pacing, of course, is different. Um, I do have difficulty with the names, so I need to get better with that. But of course, Otomo is somebody that I can point to immediately. That is an influence. So I'm trying to integrate that more into my work, and that is something that I'm just beginning to deal with or to pursue. Yeah. Yeah.
Mike Perkins also says, great answer, thanks. Hopefully see you soon. Death and the Maiden was simply stunning work.
Wow, thank you. Really, thanks very much. I appreciate it. I look forward to the next time we see each other.
Same thing, Mike. Want to see you soon. Maybe on the same place. Maybe when this is over, I'll
Yeah,
invite you to come. I'll invite you to come to some con in Europe together.
Mike, and as you know, David, Mike is one of the good people.
Yeah, he is one of the great people.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Antonio Gomez Morillo, good afternoon. I just connected, and maybe has been discussed already. No, it hasn't. Don't worry. I love Klaus's work in Punisher with Mike Baron. The covers and the interiors, they were really impressive work. What memories do you have of that book? It's so, I gotta say, it's a luxury to be able to listen and to see an artist and a genius like KLAUS Janson. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The Punisher, that was a really interesting time for me. I think we had just done Dark Knight Returns, and so the Punisher was a project that I was involved in after Dark Knight. I remember it as a period of time where I was really pushing myself, especially in my favorite issue of, we did 5 issues, and then I left the book. But the second issue in particular was, I thought, a good piece of work on my part. I wanted to have more input into the story.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turned out, Mike Baron, whose writing I like a lot, was so far ahead that, by the time I finished, say, the first issue or the second issue, he was already writing the 5th, 6th, 7th issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't really give me an opportunity to have any input.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that to be frustrating, a bit. And the schedule also was very difficult. Even though it was 6 weeks, Marvel was extremely nice to schedule it that way for me to be able to do the book. But penciling, inking, and coloring, even 6 weeks was tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. And did Byron adapt to your art at all? I mean, he changed the dialogue or movement, or it was just full script and you have to
Yeah, it was full script, and I might have added a panel or two or dropped a panel, but it was full script, and it was just I don't know what the word is, but it was work.
Yeah,
that's the wrong thing to say. Yeah.
Okay. No, it was what it was. That's it. Comic Crack says, hello all. Did you ever get into the underground scene at all? Any artists of that scene that you have been inspired by?
I'm not sure what the underground, what that refers to, but I mean, if you're talking about like the 60s or the 70s, like
I guess he means underground comics like Cram and all those. If you,
I was exposed to some of that in the late 60s and 70s during my trippy days. But I don't think I took too much from that. I think I was mostly influenced by mainstream comics at that point. Yeah.
Okay. Says Jorge Iván Argid Reboiro, continuing with going along with his Punisher with Baron, how was to create a sidekick for this character that used to be a really lonely guy? Was it all Baron's idea, or you discuss it together? How was it to design Microchip?
That was Mike's doing, and I thought that was a good idea. What's interesting about, I think, the evolution of the Punisher is that he was, to me at that point, he was an acceptable anti-hero. I think at a certain point, as time went on, he became, to me, an unacceptable anti-hero in the sense that he became more violent and more just a character that I had difficulty relating to. And so I would, I'd love to draw the Punisher again, but it would have to be a script that had some depth to it and wasn't just about killing people or dismembering people, or I used to think that comics really had no influence, or that culture or movies had very little influence on the audience, and I realize now that's not true. I think people are affected and influenced by what they read and by what they see, and we have a responsibility to put our best foot forward.
Yeah. And if as Alan or Frank used to say, having a bad day, me having a bad day, made a lot of people misinterpret my intentions when I wrote Watchmen, etc. And all those heroes becoming violent. And at that era, it wasn't only you; it was also me. If you come from Punisher, who was already an anti-hero and violent, what's the only direction you can go? Make him more violent and less of a hero. He wasn't an anti-hero; he was a villain.
Yeah.
That's my point of view, and I didn't care anymore. Like, why could I read a book about a villain? Just killing people just because they had to turn it up a notch, instead of saying, "Hey, you know what? He was violent enough. Stop. This character you don't need to touch."
Yeah, and I think David, doing or writing or drawing a story about a villain can be really fascinating.
Yeah.
But there has to be some redemptive, quality to it at some point.
And you gotta be conscious you're writing about a villain.
Right. That's right.
Because I was reading those until I said enough, those Punisher books, and I was saying they are not writing about the villain. They are writing about this guy who's more violent, more unacceptable, and making him the hero.
Right. That's right. And that I'm a little uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But I think if you can be nuanced about it, and it would be a fascinating story.
Absolutely. Yeah. It took Garth to come in and tell another version, keeping the violence, but focusing on the aspect to make him, I won't say relatable again, but acceptable for me to read. Playing with the humor and playing with other things, leaving the ultra violence. Almost, if you want to play ultra violence, treat it like Garth did, which is make it funny, make it a joke, make it go in that direction, telling us you don't have to believe this is real. It's over the top because it's part of the joke.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are ways of doing it.
Yeah. So Jeff Soto says, "Witty Mr. Janson, I love your art. Your work in Punisher and Dark Knight is one of my favorite. Thank you and best." And then Blake Roybal says, "What was it like working with on Dark Knight, the Master Race with Andy Kubert?"
That was a real trip. We got so much attention for that book. I think when Frank and I did Dark Knight Returns, it was a different time. There was no social media. There was no parades and, conventions and, all this stuff that we have now. And so when we did the master race, first of all, inking Andy or working with Andy is, come on, it's like eating a birthday cake.
Mhm.
It's just all good. It's all pleasure. It's just wonderful. And then there was the bonus of going on tour. Brian Azzarello and Frank and Andy and myself, we sort of went on tour that summer, and it was like being the Beatles. It was a lot of fun. So, I would characterize that experience as just a lot of fun, both in terms of working with Andy and then having that experience of hanging with those people and meeting fans and being on panels and all that stuff. It was great fun.
Did you have any did you have to stop any urge, inking Andy on that particular book to make it look more like Frank? Because in your head, like, this is Dark Knight, so maybe I have to follow that path, or you just from the beginning, well, this is Andy, even if it's Dark Knight, it's a different book, different artist, I'm going to do it that different way.
There is that part of me, David, that when I was doing Daredevil with Frank, before Frank came on the book, it was my job because we had so many different pencilers before Frank came on, it was my job to keep the characters looking consistent. So, we had Gil Kane, Bob Brown, Carmine Infantino, and Gene Colan, a lot of great artists, but they would change the look of Matt Murdock or his glasses, and it was my job to keep it consistent. So that's part of my DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was an attempt to maybe use some tools that I used when I was inking Frank. But I think the highest compliment that I could imagine was something that Andy said to me. He said that the inks reminded him of his dad.
Wow.
And I thought, that's what I said. I said, what? Wow, really? And so that was, so I might have tried to do a little bit of, Frank Miller on it. But there was enough of me to, I think, give it its own individual look.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, have you ever inked Adam, Andy's brother?
I inked Adam on 2 or 3 pages on a ghostwriter probably 30 years ago at
Okay.
Marvel.
Now, I was going to ask how different it is to ink each other, but if it's only 3 pages on 30 years ago.
Well, I can tell you that Adam is a little bit more tighter or more structured, and Andy is a little bit more fluid.
Mm-hmm.
If I could make the comparison, Andy's work reminds me of ballet.
Uh-huh.
And Adam's work reminds me of a construction worker.
So in a way, in a more poetic way, let's say one of them for you is more organic, and the other one is more formal.
That's right. That definitely is applicable. Yeah.
That's funny because being 2 sons of the same father, of course, one is going to go in one direction and the other one is going to go in the other. Being an artist, one is going to go more for the organic side and the other for the formal side.
Right. And then the amazing thing is, of course, now we have Emma Kubert.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andy's daughter, and she's going off in another direction. But it's fascinating.
Don't tell Adam or Andy. I think she's the one that looks more like her grandfather. Don't tell them. Because they can kill me with their pinky finger. So they don't.
Absolutely. It's a great family, obviously.
Absolutely. Felipe Gonzalez says, I don't know if you responded to this before. How have you lived through the evolution of the comic book industry and your part on it as an inker and artist? Did it have an effect on your work or some penciler who only use laptop? I guess he means if you have to wear ink somebody that only does digital?
Um, I've been pretty lucky, I think, or I don't know if that's the word lucky, but I think I've been pretty lucky to, John obviously still draws on the board, and I like that. I will tell you that I love inking blue line. I don't have a problem with it. The interesting thing about blue line is that you tend to get more of the inker on blue line.
Yeah.
Because it's not as well defined as pencils that you get on the board. But I have not yet inked an entire page digitally. I've inked panels, and I've inked certain figures, and so I still prefer to ink traditionally. And then I'll scan the pages and run them through the Cintiq, touch them up, and play with them. So it's a if I could use the word, it's a holistic process.
Yeah, but there's also a part of that people doesn't notice that it makes for an inker really different to work on a blue line than on a actual pencil page, which is when you get the pencil page, the markings of the pencils are there, where the pencil has gone strongest, and define the volume better and all that. You can feel that with your hand when you're inking.
That's right.
But when you go with blue line, there's nothing to feel. It's flat, it's less defined, so your brain has to react differently. There's things that that you have to complete more as an inker because you feel it's not there, right?
That's right, and you're right in using the word feel. You can feel it, and part of the problem that I have doing digital is I don't feel it. Because you're drawing on glass.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of advantages to digital, and it's an amazing tool. I work in Clip Studio. It's amazing. It's absolutely incredible, but you don't feel it. That's the problem that I have with digital.
That's another way I used to define it. How difficult it is for inkers to work digitally. It's like the pulse. Digital for me, inking depends a lot on your pulse. On your in the freedom for your hand to say in a way, to move, to feel the weight of your tool, and also to feel how strong you want the line to be, and that depends on your pulse.
That's right. And
David,
tell me what you think. But I think that part of the problem with digital is that the lack of feel that you have with digital makes a lot of digital work look the same, regardless of who's doing it. It's there is a certain limitation that many students experience or artists experience. Not everyone. Obviously, somebody like Eric Canetti, I find his digital work amazing.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of digital art starts to look the same because there's the feel is not there.
It's also I have Alex Sinclair and Marte Gracia, the colorist, a couple months ago.
Of course, yeah.
And Marte was telling me that it's starting to become annoying for him as a colorist. That's like a lot of the art he gets, the gray tones and all that, they look the same. It's a pattern, it's like people does the same, uses the same tool. When that in handmade art doesn't happen. You use your knowledge, but you cannot turn to the screen and take that same tool that everybody else uses. So in a way, of course, if you have that easiness, that I can get that tool and just use it. That doesn't happen in handmade stuff. So people has to go past. I think we're in a generation, and I was discussing it. It was perfect to have Alex Sinclair, because when Alex started coloring digitally, he was probably the only guy who was a painter and knew how to use Photoshop. So his comics look automatically better than anybody else, because the rest was, I knew Photoshop, so I can be a colorist. And then we have to go in coloring through the evolution where people started to be painters who knew how to use Photoshop instead of people who knows how to use Photoshop but don't know about painting.
Right.
I think it's the same with digital art right now. We're on that verge when people has to go past that threshold and say, stop using the same tools and become your own man.
Well, I'm fascinated that Alex said that. I think that's a very insightful thing for a colorist to say. And I think there is, one of the things that I was told coming up, that if your work has an identity to it or a recognizability to it, that's a plus.
Yes.
So I try to communicate that to students, that your work should not look the same. You need to have individuality, and that it's that individuality and recognizability that is a plus for your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell to young artists, when I see their pages, like, oh, you look like other 50 guys. They're like, well, but that's good. No, why would I care about watching your stuff, reading your stuff, if I already have the original? I don't care. I have the original. I want you to be yourself. I want you to look at that panel and automatically say, that's whatever. I look at one panel by Frank, John, Arthur Adams, whoever else you can say as an example, Andy Kubert, etc. Even, Adam, and automatically you just look at that panel and say, oh, that's him or that's her.
That's right. Right.
Even Emma, who's really young, you can say, look at Emma Kubert and you know, oh, that's Emma. That's what we're discussing here.
Yeah.
It's individuality. It's part of the art form. So that's the problem with digital. That's the step we gotta have. The Apple Pencil, for example, helps a lot because of the way you take it, the way you use it,
I agree.
The way you draw.
Yeah.
So that's the next step, I guess, also for the machines. The machine have to help us be more individual, give us more control.
Right. And it's interesting. I found the Apple Pencil to have more versatility than the Cintiq stylus.
Yeah, I have a couple inkers I work with that they tried to ink with Cintiq and they left it. Sorry, they left it like, no, this doesn't. I lose my own self.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with the Apple Pencil and working on the iPad Pro, they tell me the opposite. It's like, no, with the Apple, I am myself again because I have control. This tool lets me be myself.
Yes. Yes. And so, digital, as you know, it's not going to go away. You just have to find a way to overcome.
Absolutely.
And make it an individual.
Yeah, make it yours. Stop using the same fucking gray tones everybody uses for the background. Stop using SketchUp for the buildings. I had a couple days ago, and I was looking at the pages, and I was like, that's not real. Like, well, but I use SketchUp. Yeah, that's why it's not real.
Yeah.
That window there, where's the blinds?
Yeah.
Why doesn't, where's the light? And her like, why? It's like, and I took a page of example of, I don't remember who it was, who did it. I mean, maybe it was John Buscema. It was just, a landscape of New York. It's like, look at that building. See that erosion there? That's because he knew that in New York, it rains. Rain causes that. Pollution causes that.
That's right.
You see, there's blinds open in some windows. Some are closed. Some they have lights. Some have not. That's reality.
Yeah.
And you are attracting reality. If it is a perfect building that hasn't been used or a perfect blind, that's not real. And our brain, again, pattern recognition, is going to say, beep, beep, alarm, that's not real.
Yeah, and you can't fake that.
No.
There's no way technology is not going to help you with that either.
That's why I say the best digital artists are the ones that you can't notice is digital.
Yeah.
Because they make it real. They use that tool to make it real.
I agree.
Mike Perkins was telling you about digital inking. Frank Wiley described it perfectly. It'd be like when you touch a mirror and it looks as if your fingers are touching, but the mirror is between the two fingers. There's no tactile touch. There's also the spontaneity of wherever your brush is taking you. I don't think about dry brush. It just happens when it needs to rather than thinking about it beforehand.
Absolutely. I'll tell you that John and I are doing a 8-page black and white story that he's penciled and I'm inking it right now, and you can't approach it the same way that you approach a regular classic color comic. So, last night I was looking at the pages and looking at some of the stuff I've done on the pages, and I realized I need to get in there with a dry brush or some spatter or some, I need to rough it up a little bit, to get some feel into it. So I totally agree with what you're saying, David. I think you're absolutely on the mark.
No, that was Mike Perkins, by the way, not me. About Frank Wiley and all that.
Well, Mike is smarter than both of us.
Yes, put together. And he has better hair also.
That's a low bar, David.
You have nice hair. I don't. Anyway, Felipe Gonzalez Hernandez says, congratulations on your work in Batman White Knight Von Freeze. It was a good comic book, and I look at how much your art has evolved. Are you thinking about doing more one-shots or special projects in the future like those?
Absolutely. I think those are my favorite projects because I get to spend time on it. And Von Freeze with Sean, I so appreciate Sean asking me to work on it. But Von Freeze took about 6 months, and that was a luxury, we did have a deadline, but we started early. And one-shots and short stories or mini-series, they're right up my alley. So I love having projects that have a beginning and a middle and an end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We are about to cross the 2-hour threshold, so I think and it's 1 p.m. there. So you probably need to go to lunch. Feed yourself.
That is correct, sir.
So last one related to this one, and I'll let you go. Is there anything that's been nagging you for years? Any project or idea just been saying, I am not retiring or dying. I don't see you retiring, by the way. Before I do this project, this idea that's like, I need, sooner or later, I'm going to do it. Is there anything that's been there for years that...
there's a couple of ideas that I've been kicking around forever. I would like to do something very personal. I don't know if there's a market for that.
I would say there is right now.
I would hope so, for the health of the medium, if for no other reason. But I'd like to do something personal. I'd like to do maybe something semi-autobiographical or biographical. I've had an interesting family. I've had, I think, an interesting life. I've thought about doing a biography of Beethoven. I think that period of time was really interesting. And my take on it would be along the lines of that those composers during that period of time, they all knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
Beethoven knew Haydn, and Haydn knew Mozart, and Mozart knew, everybody else. And it was like the Avengers. And I thought that would be a funny take on it. But, time has a terrible way of getting away from you.
Yeah.
I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I enjoy what I'm working on now. But I've always got something else, percolating in the back.
Yeah. And with the years, what you learn is that you need to pick your fights, or your projects in this case.
That's right. That's right. I will say I am at the point where I think I can take some time to do work that may not necessarily bring in a lot of money, but would be personally satisfying.
Good.
So I think about that a lot.
Too much. Stop. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy it.
You've been really great. This is one of my favorite podcasts that I've ever done. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah,
so much.
you've been really good. I have to say. I
Please What, please?
I was just going to say I congratulate you on your, how many have you done? 111, 112, 113?
No, you are 119.
19?
Yeah.
119? That's amazing. That is amazing. And the ones that I've listened to, I've really enjoyed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're really gracious. It's an honor. Please don't cut, because I want to say properly thank you to you after we cut the live feed. But to all of you, to the fans, and to you, Klaus, thank you so much for being here. It's been amazing. Thank you so much for your questions. Again, don't be assholes. Wear your mask. Thank people, okay?
Always good advice.
Take care of yourselves.
Guys, thanks. Everybody, thank you.
And see you tomorrow with Luis Bustos and Pepo Pérez in Spanish, en español. And on Friday, Ross Ritchie, founder and CEO of Boone Studios. Goodbye. Good day. Don't be